Israel declares war on Hamas after the Palestinian militant outfit launches an audacious attack at dawn on Saturday, which sees over 700 Israelis killed and over 200 taken hostage. Israeli troops mobilized and airstrikes hit the Gaza Strip, killing over 400 Palestinians as Israel PM promises retribution. The U.S. pledges support for Israel and dispatches an aircraft carrier strike group to the Mediterranean in support of the Jewish state. Wall Street closes higher on Friday, but futures head lower as war breaks out between Israel and Hamas. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific trade weak, while the gift nifty is indicating a muted start for the Indian market. The Hamas-Israel war also causes a spike in oil prices. Brent hits $88 a barrel, surging over 4% this morning. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority will infuse nearly 5,000 crore rupees in Reliance Retail for a 0.59% stake, valuing the company at 8.38 lakh crore. IT giant TCS says its board will consider a buyback along with its results on Wednesday, while M6 is now allowed to shift to its new platform after SEBI withdraws its abeyance order and the regulator's tech panel gives the go-ahead. The GST Council cedes the right to tax extra-neutral alcohol to the states. GST on molasses gets slashed to 5% from 28%, while the Council also decides to not levy any GST on millet flour containing at least 70% millet composition. However, a 5% GST will be levied on branded millet products. Good morning in the Mumbai News Center. I'm Sonal Bhutra. You're watching Power Breakfast. It's a fresh new week, a Monday morning, and there's a lot that's happening globally. So, of course, we'll talk all about that. But first up, let's take a look at what's happening in the Asian markets. They're largely shut. Taiwanese markets are shut. Hong Kong is also shut because of a natural calamity that's happening there. And there is also a Chinese market which have come back after a week's holiday. But they are not doing so well despite that big break that the markets have seen. That index is down 1% as we speak. But if we look at the gift nifty, that'll come up for you on the screen because that one is indicating that the start for our own markets, that could be in the red as well. It's a 21-point downtick, which is the implied open right now for the gift nifty at that 19,656. But of course, a lot has happened globally in terms of war, and that will cause a lot of uncertainty, not only for markets, but other factors as well. So that is something that we'll be tracking through the course of the day as well. Let's talk about the U.S. markets. Wall Street ended Friday's trading session higher, with the Dow Jones surging close to 300 points, the S&P rising over 1%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite closing with gains of over 1.5%. The S&P ended up 0.48% for the week, snapping a 4-week negative streak. The Nasdaq climbed 1.6%, while the Dow Jones closed down 0.3%. In overnight trade, meanwhile, Dow Jones futures gave up 200 points after Hamas attack against Israel. Moving on to the big macro cue from the U.S., the economy added 336,000 jobs in September, sharply above consensus estimates of 170,000. Wage inflation, however, softened. Average hourly earnings were up 0.2% over the prior month and 4.2% from a year ago. CNBC's Rick Santelli gets us the details.
Non-farm payroll, a whopping 336,000. Much stronger than what was expected in the 165 to 170,000 camp. And if you look at the unemployment rate, it remained at 3.8%. It remained at 3.8%. And if we look at average hourly earnings, they also remained at up 0.2%. Now, real quickly, up 3.8%. happens to be the highest since Jan of 22, so we remain at that level even though it's 2 months running. And on the wages, month-over-month average hourly earnings up 0.2. That is the smallest since February of 22, and it remains the smallest since February 22 with back-to-back months. Let's take a year-over-year perspective. Average hourly earnings are 4.2%, 4.2%. That is the lowest level going all the way back to June of 21.
Okay, on that note, let's listen into some important opinion coming in from Goldman Sachs' Jan Hatzius on the U.S. labor market.
This is a very high number relative to all other signals. So, yeah, I think it overstates the underlying trend. The household survey was also softer. So I think you have to take any monthly number with a grain of salt. But the bigger takeaway is that the economy in the third quarter was very strong. GDP is probably going to show a big increase. We're at 3.7%. And the payroll numbers for the third quarter were pretty consistently strong. Not 336, but in the sort of 260, 270 range on average.
Okay, all right. With that, let's move on and talk about the big global development we are tracking this morning. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declares war in response to attacks by Palestinian militant groups over the weekend. This marks the worst assault on the state of Israel in over 50 years. NBC's Jay Gray gets us this report.
The fighting is intensifying. Israel formally declaring war against Hamas after a surprise attack by the Palestinian militant group early Saturday morning.
This weekend, Hamas started a war against Israel with the worst massacre of innocent civilians in Israel's history. Hamas was more barbaric and more brutal than ISIS. Let me be crystal clear. Israel will respond with determination and force to their unprovoked war crimes.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with military and defense leaders Sunday. As Israeli forces continue to battle groups of Hamas fighters holed up in towns across the country while unleashing relentless air attacks on the Gaza Strip. A continuation, Palestinians say, of years of deadly violence and suppression by Israeli troops and leadership that many say led to the weekend attack. Hundreds on both sides are dead, including government sources now confirmed to NBC News, several U.S. citizens. Other Americans may be among hundreds who've been kidnapped and taken into Gaza. The Pentagon now saying U.S. ships and aircraft are moving closer to the region.
The focus now has to be on making sure that Israel has what it needs to deal with this attack and to make sure that its citizens are safe and secure.
Jewish communities across the U.S. praying for that security and safety on edge as Palestinian supporters march in Chicago. Fallout from the fighting clearly stretching way beyond the battlefield. Jay Gray, NBC News.
Okay, we'll keep getting you more updates on this developing story. But Wall Street futures are under pressure this morning following Hamas' surprise attack on Israel. Listen in to Vance Howard of Howard Capital Management talk about how the escalating conflict could impact global markets.
Oil prices are clearly going to go up. They're going up now. This created a tremendous amount of instability, not just in the international markets, but it'll create some instability over here in our markets. Normally, when you have some instability in foreign markets such as the Middle East, it doesn't last very long in our domestic markets. Usually, we trade through it at a pretty decent pace. But we've sort of the market's been trading at a pretty erratic downward trend over the past 4 to 6 weeks, and this sure doesn't help things. We thought, it looked like the market was going to firm up and hit a double bottom, but with this being thrown into the mix, I think that investors need to be a lot more cautious right now. This market could turn a little bit nasty for a short period of time. We're watching it. We were optimistic until, a day and a half to 3 days ago until this happened. So, we'll have to see what happens over the next, 2 to 3, 4 days.
Okay, and crude prices have also spiked after tensions escalated in West Asia. Manisha is joining us with all the details. Hey, Manisha, good morning.
Morning, and thank you for that, Veli. As the crude oil prices have surged 4.5% as we open for trade Monday morning. This is a knee-jerk reaction, as the markets have been calling it. The attack by Hamas on Israel over the weekend has found its geopolitical tension escalate within the crude oil prices there. While when you look at Israel, there are only 2 oil refineries with a capacity of a small 300,000 barrels per day, and Palestine basically produces or refines no crude oil. So within that area, there is no concern really. But the concerns are over escalation in the geopolitical tensions. There are reports of Iran involved in planning attacks, and that might lead to some concern to the markets. Apart from that, it also is about Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, UAE, all of these countries coming out with a joint statement saying that they are reaffirming adjustments to oil output if the prices continue to decline. So there were various ways that you saw the crude prices gain up. The view also going forward from here is that since this conflict sits in the wider key oil-producing regions, while this surge could be short-term, but if the war continues for a longer term, if other regional countries also get involved into this, then you perhaps are looking at much firmer crude oil prices from here.
Okay, all right. So that's what's happening in the crude oil market. Thank you so much, Manisha, for joining us with all those details. With that, we'll slip into a break. Up next, when we return, we'll tell you how these overnight global cues will impact our own markets in our Power Prep segment. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. We spoke about the global cues, but we have our research team joining in with what the trade setup looks like, what are the stocks that will be in the news, and the action from the F&O space as well. Hey guys, a very good morning to all of you. Rima, let me come across to you first up. A lot of global cues and overnight cues we have now.
Indeed. So starting with the US markets and the way they fared on Friday. Well, a strong session on Wall Street. The key indices ending with a gain going up to 1.5% for the Nasdaq. The Dow recovered 600 points from the day's low. And you spoke about that unusually very, very strong September jobs data. But this is what happened on Friday. On Saturday, there was a surprise attack by Palestinian group Hamas on Israel. And, you know, the casualty count has been rising. And this came in as a big surprise. So we are seeing a reaction in the crude market. Brent crude prices have risen 4% compared to the Friday levels, currently hovering about $88 per barrel. Now, the key focus is, now the question from here on is going to be, is it going to be localized to Palestine and Israel? Or is this going to, you know, broaden out? Is this going to be more long-lasting? If it engulfs the other regions like Iran, etc., then perhaps we could see a further impact on crude prices. Back home in the Indian markets, it's going to be all about the earnings season, which kickstarts with TCS on Wednesday. On Thursday, you've got Infosys and HCL Tech, and you top it off with on Saturday with HDFC Bank. Also this week, you've got the September CPI and the WPI August IIP data, which will be out. In terms of flows, you've got the FI selling 90 crores in the cash market, while the DII's net pot 783 crore in the cash market. Back to you.
Okay, all right. That's the market setup. Thank you so much, Rima, for all those cues. But a lot of stocks that'll be on our radar. Surbhi has that list. Hey, Surbhi, good morning.
Good morning, Sonal. So the first one on my list is Reliance. Abu Dhabi Investment Authority is going to invest close to 5,000 crores in Reliance Retail Ventures. Next is TCS. Board is going to consider a buyback along with its Q2 results on 11th of October. Now, this would be the company's fifth buyback. Titan came up with their Q2 business update. They saw revenue growth of 20%. Jewelry division grew at 19% on a year-on-year basis. Watches and wearables grew at 32%. Bank of Baroda, the total deposits were up 4% sequentially for Q2, and the domestic CASA deposits were up 1% for Q2. Prestige Estates, the total sales were up 69% and the collections were up 13% on a year-on-year basis. Metropolis Healthcare also released their Q2 business update. They said the core business saw a revenue growth of 13%, and the revenue growth was largely driven by the volumes. Tata Steel, the India production volume was up 4% and the Europe production volume was down 17% on a year-on-year basis. And lastly, MCX will be on our radar as SEBI has withdrawn its abeyance order, and now it gets approval from SEBI's technical panel to shift to the new technical platform.
Okay, that's a long list. Thank you so much, Surbhi, for joining us with that. But let's talk about all the cues from the F&O space. Manglam is joining us now. Hey, Manglam.
Good morning. So, on Friday, we had a decent trading session. We had, the IT stocks as well as the Nifty bank support the frontline index, and that did well. And as a result of which, the Nifty went ahead and conquered the 50-day moving average of 19,607, closed above that as well. However, between Friday and now, a lot of things have changed. The question is, has the texture of the market changed? A couple of positives. One, the FI selling has come down to 90 odd crores, and the DII buying at around 780 crores. FIs continue to buy in index futures the last few trading sessions, though they're still heavily net short. If you just take a look at the last 4 trading sessions, the FI longs have inched higher from 24 odd percent to 27%. And if the market recovers from the lows that, it hits in today's trading session, as the GIFT Nifty is implying, then maybe there would be some case for further short covering. Even in index options, the cues are positive. They bought more calls than puts. And at the same time, they wrote more puts than calls as well. So they're hoping for a bit of an upside while they expect some support coming in on the downside. Where is that support? 19,600 and 19,650 puts. Both of them seeing a fair amount of writing, telling you there is support between 19,550 and 19,600 itself. On the way up, however, the one resistance to watch out will be the 20-day moving average, which comes in at 19,786. Once we cross past that, there is some punt buying taking place at the 19,900 and the 20,000 calls itself. all of that boils down to what the IT stocks do this time around. Why is that? IT results during this week, as Rima pointed out, so we'll keep an eye out on that. And then a couple of stocks we'll be watching out for. MCX saw some short covering on Friday. Let's see whether that continues or not. And Titan went into its quarterly update with a lot of long positions added. The question is whether that sustains or not as well.
Okay, that's the big question, of course. Thank you guys for joining us and prepping us up for this trading day ahead. With that, we'll slip into a break. Up next, when we come back, we'll get you the key takeaways from the 52nd GST Council meet held on Saturday. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast. It's time to look at some important announcements made following the GST meet on Saturday. On extra neutral alcohol, or ENA, the GST Council has ceded the right to impose the tax to states, which can now decide on the levy on raw alcohol. Also, GST on molasses has been slashed to 5% from 28%. The Council has also decided to not levy any GST on flour containing at least 70% millet. However, a 5% tax will be levied on branded millet products. And in some other decisions, the Council approved an increase in the tenure of the President of Appellate Tribunal up to 70 years from earlier 67 years. Okay, those are some of the big takeaways from the GST Council meet over the weekend. But on to some updates from the ongoing Cricket World Cup. Hosts India had an encouraging start to their campaign, winning their first game against Australia with few hiccups. The Australians won the toss and elected to bat first, and a good show by the Indian bowlers restricted Australia to a total of 199 runs. In response, Australia had India down to 3 wickets for only 2 runs on the board. Virat Kohli and KL Rahul then steadied the ship with a 165-run partnership. Kohli did lose his wicket with about 23 runs yet to be made, but the job was done and KL Rahul narrowly missed out on a fine century as India enjoyed a dream start to their World Cup campaign. Okay, all right, on that positive note, we'll take your leave on this edition of Power Breakfast. Stay tuned, Bazaar Morning Call comes up next with all the market action.